This video response is going to go out to D. Lukens9. It is also going to go out to Crazy Josh Cravey. And this is all because I made a video response to Crazy Josh Cravey concerning his video about Apple Rant. Okay? And D. Lukens9 watched my response and then left me a few comments. Now, the first thing is I wanted to thank D. Lukens9 for agreeing with me that when it comes to raw data, you want to process that on a personal computer and not on an Apple. So I want to thank you for that. Now, you had mentioned that I got a few facts mixed up about graphical user interface. Well, I did a lot more research and I've got 2 pages of notes here. And hopefully I do a better job in this video than I did in the last one. Now, when it comes to graphical user interface, which is what I brought up in my response video a few days ago, it was first started by a guy by the name of Douglas Engelbart. Okay? And this Douglas Engelbart acquired his engineering degree in 1948. And he started working for the National Advisory Council on Aeronautics, which was the predecessor of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Okay? Now, Douglas Engelbart worked as a radar operator in World War II. He did finally earn a PhD in 1955 and started working for the Stanford Research Institute in Stanford, Connecticut. Okay? As he started doing his work, he did finally start receiving funding from the United States Air Force to continue his research. Okay? And he did finally publish an essay entitled Augmenting Human Intellect. Okay? Now, he was the guy who initially invented the text-based terminals, and he also was the guy who invented the mouse, although the mouse he invented was nothing like the mouse that we have today. Okay? Now, Xerox, the company Xerox, was very fascinated by this guy's work. They were so fascinated by this that they actually formed the Palo Alto Research Center in Palo Alto, California in 1970. They actually invented, okay, their research team actually invented the very first laser printer. And that laser printer was called the Alto. And this was created in 1973. Okay? Now, the Alto used what is called bitmap graphics. That meant that the pixels on the screen could be individually turned on and off. It was the first time that pixels on a screen could be individually turned on and off. Okay? Now, a guy on that research team known as Charles Simonyi, it's Simonyi, and I have definitely mispronounced his name. I am sorry for that. He authored the very first word processing software called Bravo. Okay? And then this research team also invented a programming language called Smalltalk, and it was the very first object-oriented programming language. Okay? Now, Smalltalk implemented what we know today as Windows, although it was not the Windows operating system. It was the very first time Windows was used in a programming language. Okay? Now, the thing is that Steve Jobs later on toured the Palo Alto Research Center after acquiring stock in Xerox. Okay? And then he went over and toured the Palo Alto Research Center, learned about all this graphical user interface, and decided to use that in his personal computer known as the Lisa. Okay? Now then, the problem was that the Lisa was a very expensive computer, not only to design, but also to sell. So, Steve Jobs created a lower-end version of this called the Macintosh. And he marketed the Macintosh that way. Now, the Lisa was originally created with a text-based operating system. In other words, you'd have the C:/ whatever, and you would type lines of text, and those lines of text would execute, and then you would have things happen in the computer. Okay? But then later on, like I said, when Steve Jobs toured the Palo Alto Research Center, he developed the GUI for the Lisa. And like I said, right after that, he developed the Macintosh, and that's how the Macintosh got started. Okay. Now, what was included in this graphical user interface? The one in Lisa, by the way. Icons that represented files, the drag and drop feature, the pull down menus, the trash can. You know how you have to have the trash can, which you can delete all your files that way. And the double click mouse was included in the Lisa. Okay. The Lisa was released in 1983. And the Macintosh followed thereafter in 1984. Okay? Now, there was also another company called VisiCorp. And VisiCorp invented a computer program called VisiCalc. And they also created a program called Vision in 1983. And if I mispronounce that, I'm sorry. Okay? Well, about this same time, Bill Gates, who had a lot of associations with IBM, and of course IBM having a lot of associations with Xerox, he invented the Windows operating system in 1983, but it didn't get formally introduced into the marketplace until 1985. The thing was that IBM didn't like his first version of Windows, and so they decided not to put it in their personal computers. These would be the PC XTs and the PC ATs. So if you bought an IBM PC XT or you bought an IBM PC AT, you didn't get Bill Gates' Windows. Okay? But that turned out to be a big mistake for IBM. And so they rethought this, they contacted Bill Gates, and Bill Gates helped develop the Windows operating system for the next generation of IBM PCs, which would be known as the PS2s. Now then, about this same time, Steve Jobs was desperate. He wanted Microsoft to develop a word processing package and a spreadsheet package that would work in his Macintosh. So he made an agreement with Bill Gates. Okay? And so what he did was he licensed some of the graphical user interface things that he had in the Macintosh to Bill Gates. And in return, Bill Gates created the Microsoft Word and the Microsoft Excel to work in the Macintosh. Of course, all this also worked in the Lisa. Well, the thing was that when Windows 2.0 was created, it had more of these graphical user interface components that could be found in the Lisa and the Macintosh. And this did not set well with Apple computers or with Steve Jobs. So Apple sued Bill Gates. Unfortunately, Apple lost. Well, actually, not really so unfortunately, they just lost. Okay? And about that same time as Apple was filing a lawsuit with Microsoft, then Xerox started filing a lawsuit with Apple because a lot of that GUI technology came from Xerox. So if Apple was going to win over Microsoft, then Apple would then have to owe Xerox. And that was going to be a big problem. So anyway, Apple lost, Xerox lost, and we now have Windows as it is today. The thing is that Steve Jobs himself did not develop the graphical user interface. It was several of the former employees of the Palo Alto Research Center that developed most of the GUI you would find in the Lisa and in the Macintosh. So Steve Jobs and himself did not play a major role in computer technology, at least not back then. It wouldn't be until much later when he developed the iPod, the iPad, the iPhone, that kind of thing, that he really would start taking a bigger role in computer technology. It is because of all of this, and like I said in my last video, because of the proprietary nature of Steve Jobs and the Apple Corporation, that's why people like me have absolutely nothing to do with Apple. Period. You see what I mean? Bill Gates would have probably developed that GUI with or without Steve Jobs. That's just an inevitable fact. And I'm sorry that there had to be such a dang lawsuit and that whole dang blasted 9 yards, because all that did was hurt the consumers. And I think Apple is still making a they're making a huge mistake. Okay? They still should not be proprietary, because their proprietary nature is actually going to end up hurting their sales in the end. I honestly believe that. So, anyway, now you have the goodies. I will talk in a future video about registry keys. I just didn't have enough time tonight to do all that research. But anyway, now you know what's really going on. I will tell you more in a future video. If you want to reply to any of this D-Lukens 9, you are more than welcome to. At least I have presented quite a bit of history here. I may have not gotten everything down to the decimal point, but I think there's enough history here that people will investigate and see for themselves what I'm talking about. Alright, until my next video, I want you guys to just stay tuned.